We are digging deeper into the student loan relief. President Biden, of course, announcing that long-awaited plan to cancel student debt for some people. If you currently have a federal loan and you make less than $125,000 per year, you do qualify. Pell Grant recipients could see up to $20,000 canceled. But as we know, college is expensive. The average tuition for a student living on campus at a four-year institution, just under $26,000. Spanning 4 years, a bachelor's degree comes at a six-figure cost. And according to our exclusive NewsNation Decision Desk HQ poll, 52% of respondents place the blame on colleges and universities when it comes to who is most responsible for the skyrocketing cost to attend college. So this is our first topic today on a Rush Hour Roundtable. We want to introduce you to today's panel. We have Brad Polumbo, policy correspondent at the Foundation for Economic Education, Julio Rivera, editorial director of Reactionary Times, Tracy Walder, former CIA and FBI agent and author of The Unexpected Spy, and Elaine Swann, lifestyle expert and author of Let Crazy Be Crazy. So, panel, should Americans who don't have any student loan debt or already paid off their loans be paying to help fund this relief program? Julio, let's start with you.
My answer is a resounding no. And I've seen estimates ever since this has been announced and in advance of it being announced, where this is going to cost the average American family about $2,000. That's a lot of money. And in addition to that, this is going to be added to the deficit, which is already last year $2.8 trillion. That was the largest in terms of percentage of GDP, 13%, that it's been since World War II. I mean, we're talking about we have historically bad economic numbers, and now we're doubling down on bad policy. The fact of the matter is the average student loan debt across the country is about $17,000. Yes, there's people that owe over $100,000, but that only represents about 7% of all borrowers. So $10,000 is really only a drop in the bucket compared to what they actually owe. Most people have a manageable student debt, and I think it sends a bad message, a very, people being irresponsible about the choices that they make headed into college, what majors they choose. They don't check the Bureau of Labor Statistics to find out what are the in-demand fields, which fields will pay enough that when they get out of college, they'll be able to find a job and be able to comfortably pay off their loans. This is not fair. I think that this is a ploy by the left that has handled this economy horribly to try to drum up support in advance of the midterm.
I think that really, if we look at that NewsNation poll that we just had on, 52% of people think that this really doesn't fix the crux of the problem, which is the cost of education. I teach in college now. I happen to be fortunate enough in that my dad was a professor at the college I attended, so I did go for free. But, I did have student loan debt when I obtained my master's. So did my husband, so did many of my friends. And really, in my opinion, what this is doing is putting this temporary Band-Aid on, but not really fixing the bleed, so we say. And so it doesn't change the price. Also, it's not encouraging banks in any way, shape, or form to really lower their interest rates, which, that's something that they could do to make the cost a little bit more affordable. So I think all it's doing is just this really temporary measure that, in my opinion, isn't going to make a dent, in a lot of people's ultimate loan repayments. But I really think that it's not changing the core problem, which is the price and then really high interest rates on some of these loan paybacks.
Absolutely. And I do want to talk about that. But first, I want to make sure that I give Elaine and Brad a chance to respond. And Elaine, I saw your face as Julio was giving his answer. Go ahead, Elaine.
My gosh, there's so much to unpack here. First of all, yes, definitely we need to fix the problem, which is the price of education. That is something that definitely needs to be fixed, and that is the fault of these colleges and universities. But when we start to say that students didn't do their due diligence to check and see if their job market would pay them in the field that they go into, that's not necessarily fair. When we look at the individuals who are asking, there's a cry for help within a huge community here in the United States for people who are saying, look, this is challenging. I cannot afford it. What we see happening here is individuals who need the help are going to get the help. This is not people saying that they just willy-nilly signed up for a loan and cannot afford to pay for it. But you have to think about this. There are individuals who look like me who will go to college, get the degree, get the education in a field that is wide open, but not be hired in that field just because of either their name and the way it looks on the application, as though it might be a person of color who people think that they may not fit up to the job, or either by the color of their skin. We know that there are companies who fake.
Not in 2022. I'm sorry. No. I don't buy that argument in 2022. Not with affirmative action and everything else that we have in America. No.
I am still a Black woman in the United States of America in 2022. Folks, I tell you right now, this is still an issue. And so there are people who are very happy, who are saying, you know what, this respite of $10,000 will do a world for me. And why? Because all people are going to be able to do is be able to put more money back in the economy by being able to pay their debts and their bills and so forth in other ways. We can do this here in this country. If we can send billions of dollars to help other countries, then we should be able to help ourselves as well. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I know we don't have a lot of time for it, but that's my take.
Thank you for that, Elaine. There is a lot to unpack, but Brad, before we move on to the other aspects of this, I just want to let you give your response.
Yeah, there's so much here, but I think Biden's only putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. In 4 years, we'll be back at the amount of student loan debt we have today, $1.6 trillion. Canceling, aka transferring to taxpayers, does not solve the problem, which was created by a combination of blank check federal subsidies that raise prices, administrative bloat run amok, and a combination of other things. But it's also just a gut punch for millions of Americans right now who scrimped and saved. I worked 24-hour shifts as a security guard at night and graduated in 3 years. I am going to have to pay more in taxes now to cover the decisions of people who didn't do that. And in hindsight, I should have went to the fancy private school that I got into, or maybe taken those weekends off, just run up a little bit more loans and passed them on to Uncle Sam, and I would have been better off. So President Biden, Democrats, they're making people like me feel like absolute suckers right now. And we're all going to get hit with $500 billion more in taxes to pay for this.
Well, so that takes me to the next thing. I mean, will this relief make things better or make things worse, in your opinion? Because, at the heart of this, there is, of course, the skyrocketing cost of a college education. It's increased 5 times the rate of inflation in the past 50 years. How do we rein that in and not have to put these Band-Aids on what is an overall larger problem, that this cost is just getting out of control and unattainable for so many American families?
Well, the big problem to me, I'm just going to say, just the big problem is the government got involved in the first place. Once they decided that they were going to guarantee loans to anybody who wanted to go to college, the universities got out of control and you saw tuition rates skyrocket. I have to agree with Brad with what he said. There's a lot of people that work hard, to fund their education. Right now, my daughter is entering into her sophomore year of college. I made sacrifices along with her mother, and my daughter, who's working part-time, is also contributing to the cost of her own education. This is not fair to people like us.
Well, here's the thing, too. I, too, put my daughter through college as a single mom. I worked hard, I got 2 jobs, and I put her through college. But I do know that, realistically speaking, not everyone was able to do that for whatever their personal reasons are. But there are people here in our country who exist where this is fair for them. This is the thing about it. Here in this country, we all work hard and we pay taxes. And so when we pay our taxes, it goes to help those who are less fortunate. So if there is someone who is less fortunate, fine with me. I will pay the tax so that someone else can.
But student debt is not held by those who are less fortunate. 1 in 3 Americans age over 25 went to college. They earn a lot more money, $1 million more over the lifetime. That's why people go to college. And they're the only ones that benefit from this. So what you're doing is using taxpayer money to help a slice of society that, broadly painting, is more affluent than everybody else. That's not targeted aid to the needy.
This really is getting to the core of the issue, which is the price. The price is really, really high. And, to Julio's point, that I am concerned. You know, I worked for the CIA, I worked for the FBI. Despite what people think, your salary is incredibly low when you started those jobs. And I was a liberal arts major. And, you know, I personally did not think about my earning power. And I agree that most people are not making those decisions when they first start into college at 17, 18 years old. And I am concerned that the price now of college, or the price of the interest that's going to be on these loans, is really going to create a gap almost in the kind of education that we have. And what's going to happen to those liberal arts majors who say, you know, I can't pay this back because my earning power is going to be very different than somebody's earning power in, you know, say engineering or the sciences or math. And that is really concerning to me about a country and what our future is going to look like if we kind of are devoid of this group of critical thinkers that might pursue.
See, I think that's a good thing.
All right. Well, panel, this conversation has been great. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but we do have more topics to get to.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.